Anna lived alone in a small apartment on the fourth floor of an old brick building. The place was quiet, the windows overlooked a small courtyard with a few trees. She loved this silence, especially at night, when the city fell asleep and her thoughts were alone with herself. One night, lying in bed, she heard a strange sound. It was a clear, slow knock, as if someone was carefully walking on the ground. Anna frowned. She knew for sure that her windows overlooked the courtyard, and the ground was far from there. "Someone is probably walking down the street," she muttered, trying to convince herself that nothing unusual was happening. But the sounds became louder. Now they were footsteps, as if someone was walking right outside her window. She sat up slowly in bed, her heart beating faster. The footsteps stopped, but another sensation arose, as if someone was looking at her. She pulled back the curtain and looked outside. The moonlight illuminated the yard, but there was no one there. Only the branches of the tree moved in a light breeze. Anna decided not to pay attention to her fear. But the next night, the sounds were repeated. This time, the steps sounded closer, and she was sure someone was walking outside the window, although this was impossible. Footsteps became a familiar part of Anna's nights. Each night, they became more distinct, closer, as if someone was slowly walking around her windows. She tried to convince herself that it was just the wind or a random noise, but the fear grew with each passing night. On the third night, Anna heard the footsteps stop, just outside her bedroom. She didn't dare open her eyes, afraid that she would see something that shouldn't be there. "It's impossible," she whispered, clutching the blanket. Suddenly she heard a soft creak. It sounded like someone running a finger along the glass. Her heart began to beat faster when she heard another creak, and then another. She gathered all her courage, slowly stood up, and walked to the window. The trees in the yard swayed calmly in the wind, but Anna noticed something strange. There were marks on the surface of the glass, long like fingerprints, that led along the window. At that moment, she saw a shadow. It moved along the glass, slowly and silently, as if it were watching her. Anna stepped back. Her breathing became ragged. She turned on the light, hoping that it would help, but the footsteps outside the window began again. They were louder, as if whoever was walking there now wanted to be heard. The next night, she decided to stay in the living room, away from the bedroom window, but the footsteps followed her. Now they sounded along the entire perimeter of her apartment. One day, when the footsteps were especially loud, she went to the window again, but this time the shadow stopped. It did not move, but an imprint resembling a human palm remained on the glass. Only this palm was too big, and the fingers were unnaturally long. Anna stepped back, holding back a scream. Her fear turned to despair. She realized that this was not just a random sound. Something was walking outside her windows, and each time it got closer. That night, Anna felt that something had changed. The footsteps outside the window sounded especially loud, and the air in the room became cold, despite the closed windows and the heating on. She tried to sleep, but sleep did not come. Her attention was drawn to a quiet, almost imperceptible clicking. At first, she thought it was the old heater making noise, but the clicking was repeated, and it was coming from the window. "Ow!" she whispered, seized by horror. Gathering her courage, Anna went to the window. It was locked as always, but the handle of the lock was shaking, moving slowly, as if someone was trying to turn it from the outside. Anna lifted the lid back a few inches to look through the narrow opening in the door. "Who is it?" she cried out, although her voice was shaking. The answer was a deep groan heard right behind the glass. Anna jumped back, and at that moment the handle clicked. The lock gave in. The window opened by itself, and an icy wind blew into the room. Along with it, something appeared in the darkness outside the window. It was not human. It was a dark, distorted figure with long limbs, its silhouette moving as if it were dissolving in the air. The creature had no face, but Anna felt that it was looking right at her. "Don't come any closer." Her voice broke, but her legs refused to move. The creature slowly reached into the room, its long fingers touching the windowsill, leaving traces of frost. It stretched out, taking on a shape that seemed both familiar and completely alien. Anna rushed to the door in panic, but the creature's footsteps were now echoing in the room. It moved slowly but purposefully, its shadow covering the walls, floor, and ceiling. "What do you want?" she screamed, clutching the door handle. There was no answer, only footsteps that grew louder until she felt an icy touch on her hand. The next morning, the neighbors noticed that the window in Anna's apartment was open, although no one saw her. There was no sign of a struggle in the room, only strange marks on the glass that could not be erased. "How horrible!" they cried. "Anna was never like this before." Now at night, some residents hear footsteps outside their windows, even if they live above the 4th floor.